In the 17th century, the Ottoman Empire was vast, stretching from Hungary to Sudan and from Algeria to Iraq. The nations of Western Europe were engaged in a near-permanent defensive struggle against this formidable empire, facing numerous near defeats and setbacks. One significant event occurred in 1683 when the enormous Ottoman army besieged Vienna, the capital of Austria. The siege nearly resulted in an Ottoman victory. However, at the last moment, King Sobieski of Poland rallied an allied army and defeated the Turks, effectively eliminating the Turkish threat to Europe. But what if the Turks had won at Vienna and successfully conquered Austria? Would they have continued their expansion into Europe, threatening Christendom? What would the borders and cultures look like in such a scenario? These questions form the basis of this alternate history. In this timeline, the Austrians fail to secure an alliance with Poland, perhaps because the Poles see no reason to intervene or are preoccupied with other matters. Without reinforcements from King Sobieski, the Austrians are overrun and Vienna falls into Turkish hands. Consequently, Austria and Bohemia, which is modern-day Czech Republic, would come under Ottoman control. However, this conquest would not prevent the eventual decline of the Ottoman Empire, and the Turks would not push further into Europe. Historically, the Ottomans launched their campaigns from Constantinople and did not winter in the field. This limited their reach, meaning that Vienna was the furthest they could advance while still returning home by winter. Additionally, the Ottoman Empire was already in decline, plagued by ineffective sultans caught up in court politics and disconnected from the realities of governance. The empire suffered from inefficiencies, with guilds controlling the economy and a weakening janissary class hindering military modernization. The once great Turkish aristocrats had grown decadent and regionalistic, while Orthodox Sunni clerics stifled technological advancement. Thus, even if they conquered Austria, internal issues would likely lead to the empire's continued decline. Many people overlook the significance of the War of Spanish Succession, which was a pivotal conflict in European history. The war began as the Spanish Empire, despite its decline, still loomed large. With the death of the last Spanish Habsburg king, the empire was at risk of being divided between the Austrians and the French. The prospect of a French-controlled Spanish Empire alarmed the British, Dutch, and Austrians, leading them to declare war against France. At this time, France, ruled by Louis XIV, the so-called Sun King, was at the height of its power. There was widespread fear that if France secured the Spanish throne, it would dominate all of Europe. The ensuing War of Spanish Succession was a brutal conflict lasting 13 years, ultimately won by the anti-French alliance, thanks to the brilliant leadership of John Churchill, Duke of Marlborough, and the Duke of Eugene of Savoy. In this alternate timeline, with Austria no longer a power, the Spanish crown would likely revert to France. Louis XIV, who had long sought to expand his influence across Europe, would seize the opportunity to declare war on his remaining rivals, the Dutch and the English. Without Austria as an ally, the French would easily defeat the Dutch and push the alliance off the continent. In our timeline, Austria benefited significantly from this situation, but without it, the German states, particularly Prussia, would likely rise to fill the void. The Ottoman province of Bohemia would be far removed from Constantinople, and thus vulnerable to Prussian expansion. Under Frederick the Great, Prussia would conquer Bohemia, significantly increasing its power. Frederick, a military genius, would easily defeat any Ottoman forces. By mid-century, it is plausible that Prussia would reach the Danube and reclaim Austria for the Christians, accelerated by the stagnation of the Ottoman military and Frederick's strategic prowess. Austria and the Czech Republic had substantial Protestant populations during this period, which had been suppressed by centuries of Catholic Habsburg oppression. In this timeline, with Protestant Prussians in charge, these regions would likely retain their Protestant majority. The rise of a powerful Prussia would alarm France, prompting an alliance with Russia and the Ottomans against Prussia, which would be supported by Britain. This conflict would resemble the 7 Years' War of our timeline, but would likely result in a more significant Prussian victory due to the Ottomans' military ineffectiveness compared to the Austrians. The struggle between Prussia and France would intensify, with each vying for control over Germany. Britain would consistently support Prussia to counter French dominance. By this point, the outcome of such a conflict is uncertain, but several broader historical implications can be predicted. Notably, there would likely be no French Revolution. With France controlling half of Europe, it would enjoy immense wealth, and the French monarchy would be viewed as a bastion of military brilliance. The conditions necessary for revolution would not materialize, and even a setback in the 7 Years' War would not be enough to provoke such upheaval. The absence of a revolution would also mean no Napoleonic Wars. Consequently, the Spanish Empire would endure, albeit impoverished, propped up by its ally and puppet master, France. The Ottoman Empire's decline would take longer, as the Austrians in our timeline pushed into Ottoman territory to protect Vienna. With Austria gone, the Prussians would not feel immediate pressure from the Ottomans and would focus on their conflicts with France and Russia. Whether this extended time frame would allow the Ottomans to modernize and survive is uncertain, but it is likely that Russia would exploit this opportunity to expand its influence in the Balkans and beyond. In our timeline, Russian foreign policy aimed to conquer Constantinople and unify Slavic peoples under Turkish rule. The outcome of this ambition in an alternate timeline remains speculative, but one could expect significant Russian territorial gains in the Balkans. What do you think would happen if the Turks won in Vienna? Share your thoughts below.